Hi, I'm Michael Stewart.
And hi, I'm Claire O'Callaghan.
Last year, we're in conversation at the Town Festival of Music and Words in Halifax, co-organised by Grayston Unity and the Book Corner, to have a very special conversation.
We sat down in Calderdale Museum to discuss Finding Emily, a conversation that explored the life and work of one of Yorkshire's most mysterious writers.
We talked about her stories, her poems, her artwork, and even explored some of the myths around Emily Brontë.
And now you can listen to that conversation too.
So whether you're a lifetime Brontë fan,
or if you just want to know more about the fascinating woman who wrote Wuthering Heights,
come and join us for Finding Emily.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for coming along in this. Is it 80 miles an hour wind?
It's Wuthering.
We might call it Wuthering, yeah. Interesting word, though, Wuthering, because I think everyone says it's a Yorkshire dialect word. It's a really common Yorkshire dialect word, but is it really? You know, I mean, other than the Brontes, I've never seen it in print anywhere else.
Actually, on the way
Charlotte
here,
Brontë.
no. On the way here, you said to me, "I've only known Emily to ever say that word," and I said, "No, Charlotte uses it."
We're getting Brontë off already.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get straight to the competition.
So, thank you very much, everybody, and we're here to talk about Emily Brontë, particularly Emily Brontë and walking and nature and that side of things, really. Yeah, so South Aurham, Emily was a residential teacher there for 6 months at Law Hill, and 6 months doesn't sound a long time, but actually a really influential time for her, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is a really influential.
She's 20 years old. She's young.
Yeah, she's very young. It's not a governess role, which is the kind of role that her sisters Charlotte and Anne took on. We don't have any surviving material from other than some poetry from Emily's time there, but we certainly have Charlotte's letters to Emily that she couldn't cope with the long hours and the drudgery, and it's from there we get the famous quote that Emily apparently said to her children that she preferred the house dog to them. So it's a complicated time probably for her, and certainly when she comes back home afterwards, she doesn't ever return.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because during those 6 months, she writes an uncharacteristically happy poem about halfway into that. So she writes in December, just a few months into that job, probably the happiest poem she's ever written. So she's writing to Charlotte saying how miserable everything is, but she writes her happiest poem.
Well, we don't know that she is writing to Charlotte. We know
well,
that Charlotte
says
this,
that
her sister is miserable, but Charlotte also had her own miserable experiences as a governess by then, and she'd only lasted 3 months in one role, so a shorter period than Emily lasted at Law Hill.
But also what happens at Law Hill, if you know about Law Hill, it was built by Jack Sharp. So it was built by Jack Sharp. It lies about a mile above Waterclough Hall, which doesn't exist anymore, it's been knocked down. But John Walker and his family lived there, and John Walker adopted a son called Jack, who he favoured above his own children. His eldest son, also called John, goes to York University, and while he's away his father dies, and Jack inherits the house and all the belongings. Except it's not legal because, of course, in law, the eldest, at that time, the eldest male had right to inheritance. But by the time this has gone through court and John comes back from York to claim his inheritance, Jack has already kind of looted the place, sold off anything of any value, and with the proceeds built Law Hill. Sounds a little bit like something else, doesn't it?
It does. Well, yeah, people say so, yeah.
So, you do wonder whether she was getting ideas about Wuthering Heights even then. This is 38, so this is almost 10 years before, well, it's 8 years before. 8 years before Wuthering Heights. The thing that complicates that is that it's not the only myth, is it? The origin myths are...
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start with Emily in Halifax, but do you want to say a little bit about, obviously your book, Walking the Invisible, walks in some of her footsteps, and one of the things it does is do Law Hill, and also takes in High Sunderland Hall. So do you want to talk about some
Well,
of those
yeah,
spaces that are surrounding
sure.
this location?
Yeah, so Walking the Invisible, if you don't know, is hybrid memoir. It's walking in the footsteps of the Brontes. So I basically cover a lot of the north of England, really. It starts in Thornton, where the Brontes were born, and then it travels out like that. So the structure of the book starts in Thornton, and then it goes to Haworth, and then it goes to Liverpool this side, and Scarborough this side, and then the last chapter, A Walk Home. So it's a kind of walking book, and it involves lots of maps and so on. But there's a chapter, in fact, about Law Hill and about Emily, and I guess I was cheeky, really, but as I was writing that chapter, I went to Law Hill, and I'm in my van. I had a van at the time, I had a camper van. I did lots of this book with my dog in a camper van. That's how I kind of wrote the book, really. So I'm outside this, what's now a private residence. It's not a school anymore. It hasn't been for many years. It's a family.
Private home, isn't it?
Private home, yeah, it's a beautiful place,
Beautiful
isn't it?
chocolate Labrador. Isn't it?
Yes, indeed, yeah. And so I just thought, well, what the hell, you're only here once. So I knocked on the door and said, would you mind if I have a look round? And luckily, she was very accommodating. And she took me to the room that Emily, which is now a bathroom, in fact, where Emily stayed. And I saw through the window, I mean, it's gone now, so we can't be sure, but it looks like she had a view of High Sunderland Hall. And if you know anything about that building, it was knocked down in the 50s, in the 1950s, due to subsidence, but it was a very grand hall just above Shibden, on something called, just on the base of a hill called Pepper Hill. And it was quite an eccentric hall. It had lots of grotesque carvings outside and a date stone, and actually fits the description of the exterior of Wuthering Heights in the novel. So if you read the way that Emily describes that entrance with the cherubs and the boy with his bare ass, and another boy with his willy out, that basically was the entrance of High Sunderland Hall, which you would have seen from her window. So here we are, we're in Law Hill, which Jack Sharp built almost as a big sort of like that to John, and there she is overlooking. So I think those 6 months were very, very influential for her, weren't they?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that, as you say, she writes some uncharacteristically happy poems in that time, which maybe challenge a little bit some of the things
I know.
Think about that kind of homesickness.
Well, I should say that we actually met at an Emily Brontë conference. So Emily Bronte's bicentenary, 2018. We were the after dinner speakers. We didn't know each other at this point. So I'd written Ill Will, which is the untold story of Heathcliff. It's a novel. And Claire had just written this book here, Emily Brontë Reappraised. So these books came out within weeks of each other to coincide with Emily's bicentenary. We hadn't met before, but the Brontë Society, the Brontë Parsonage brought us together for this after-dinner speech where we were going to talk about Heathcliff and ethnicity. There was a film called Irregular Black by Lone Star, and there was a screening of this at the event itself. It turns out, we kind of brought together and we sit for dinner first before this event, and we get chatting. It turns out we were both writing about the same Emily Brontë poem. So in this book, when I go to Law Hill, the poem we were talking about, the How Still How Happy, most of Emily's poems don't have titles, they're given titles really, but the first line, How Still How Happy, is often referred to. I was using this in my chapter about Law Hill, and it turns out you were...
Yeah, I was
writing about
weirdly
it as well.
obsessed with it as well, and kind of for that reason that it's about this really important time that, again, Emily's often said to be connected to. She was terribly homesick and overworked and all those things, but that poem is a very interesting meditation on, as it says, stillness and happiness and enjoying the world, and it would have been written in these places. As I'm talking about it, do you want me to read it?
It makes sense, doesn't
Yes.
it? Yes, this is written sort of December 1838, isn't it?
This is written, yeah, it is. December 1838. So apologies to everyone in advance who's heard me read this before. I think it's become one of my favourite Emily poems. It's a kind of it's her speaking. It's got an invitation in it to somebody else, and you'll hear it. She's speaking to an imaginary listener, really, asking them to come and sit and look at the landscape, probably the landscapes you're talking about that she would have seen from Law Hill. So as Michael said, it's not got a title, but it's known by its first words, how still, how happy. So, how still, how happy. Those are words that once would scarce agree together. I loved the plashing of the surge, the change in heaven, the breezy weather, more than smooth seas and cloudless skies, and solemn, soothing, softened airs that in the forest woke no sighs, and from the green spray shook no tears. How still, how happy. Now I feel that where silence dwells is sweeter far than laughing mirth's most joyous swell, however pure its raptures are. Come sit down on this sunny stone. 'Tis wintry light over flowerless moors, but sit, for we are all alone, and clear expand heaven's breathless shores. I could think in the withered grass spring's budding wreaths we might discern. The violet's eye might shyly flash, and young leaves shoot among the fern. It is but thought. Full many a night the snow shall clothe those hills afar, and storms shall add a drearer blight, and winds shall wage a wilder war, before the lark may herald in fresh foliage twinned with blossoms fair, and summer days again begin their gloried haloed crown to wear. Yet my heart loves December's smile as much as July's golden beam. Then let us sit and watch the while the blue ice curdling on the stream.
It's a beautiful poem, and and I guess it's an interesting poem in the sense that it's not overtly a gondal poem. You know, if you know anything about Emily, most of the poems up to that point are within this fictitious world that her and Anne created called Gondal. This seems to be a departure from that.
Yeah.
But also it's so Emily as well, because she's enjoying being on her own, and she's enjoying winter. She's enjoying the bleakness of winter.
Yeah, I think that's what strikes me about that poem. You know, we tend to think of the seasons, winter, the months of death, and this poem is basically saying, I do love July, I love summer, but I love this beautiful landscape, and I love its coldness, and I love how it looks and how it's transformed in winter. And I guess that takes us really into Emily's personality, the idea of a young woman who is at one with nature, who loved nature and could find the beauty and the connection to nature wherever she was and whatever time of year it was. And I think for her, probably being in Halifax in South Aram, being away from her home, that connection to nature was probably so important to find the beauty at that point.
It reminds me a little bit actually of one of the other famous poems of hers, where she talks about love being like a rose briar, and friendship being like the holly.
Yeah.
And again, that's seasonal, isn't it? You know, the idea that love is something that's transient, it's passionate, but it's over, it's spent. But also the idea of a rose briar is surrounded in thorns, isn't it? So there's something prickly and destructive about love. We'll get on to other nights shortly. But the holly is this evergreen, but it's associated with winter, isn't it?
Yeah.
And her poems are, you know, if you go through this book here, Janet Gazzara's,
which is on sale over there.
Which is on sale there. Yeah, it's wonderful, complete collection of Emily's poems. Almost every other poem is about death and winter, isn't it? What is it? Why is she so obsessed by death, do you think?
I don't think she's necessarily obsessed by death in a morbid way. I think she appreciates nature, and if you love nature and you're at one with nature, you kind of accept the cycle of life that has to go with that, particularly a seasonal one as well, the beginning and the end and the renewal. So I think that she is comfortable with that and recognises that it's part of our bigger ecosystems. You know, she lacks sentimentality towards certain things because life is cyclical, things come and go. And obviously, I mean, you could, I guess, talk about, she does experience death at a very young age. So again, that's going to be a familiarity with her, but having said that, I think looking back on Emily's life now, to lose a mother, which is incredibly formative no matter what age it happens to you, but we might think it's extraordinary, but actually it would have been very common for families to be disjointed at that time. Mortality and life expectancy was a lot less, particularly in Haworth. You were lucky to get past the age of 6. You were lucky to live past the age of 25. So there's a brutality, I think, that goes with that. And I think if you're in an industrial mill town where there was a lot of poverty, poor sanitation, poor water, lots of sickness, and there were lots of slaughterhouses as well around in that main street. It's a beautiful chocolate box literary tourist place today, but in its day it wasn't. She would have seen that life cycle.
I completely agree. But Charlotte saw that and Anne saw that, and they didn't have the same frequency of references to death in their poems. So there's something else going on, isn't there? I think. Yes, they're brought up in a parsonage. Their view is a graveyard. They see dead bodies coming backwards and forwards all the time.
I don't know. They all lost their older sisters, didn't they? Exactly. They all had that formative experience. And there is a lot of death in a lot of their other writing, and in Charlotte's poetry and in her novels as well. Right through them.
Murder. There's lots of references to murder in her poems.
Whose poems?
Emily's poems.
Okay, what specifically are you thinking of?
Well, just if you just flick through, there are murderers. There are references to murder in her poems.
In the world of Gondal, are you referring to? Yeah. Well, I guess that brings us on to Heathcliff. Shall we talk about Wuthering Heights and Heathcliff?
Why not?
Well, I know one of your inspiration points for your fascination with Emily, but also your fascination with Heathcliff, which becomes part of Ill Will, was an essay that asked the question, is Heathcliff a murderer? Do you want to tell us about that essay and how this connects to your novel?
Well, this is back in the news, isn't it? So if you've been following what's been going on, there's a new adaptation of Wuthering Heights.
So you made it sound like Heathcliff's murdered someone again. Yeah.
Well, that as well.
Yeah.
So if you've been following the news, I mean, we'll maybe talk about what's special about Emily and why there is this kind of interest, but there just seems to be a perpetual news story somehow around the Brontes, and a few weeks ago it was announced this new adaptation, and Jacob Elordi has been cast as Heathcliff, and again it's all to do with ethnicity, isn't it? I guess for me my interest was to do with that, but it was also to do with the essay you're talking about. So John Sutherland wrote an essay which became a book actually when I was at university, because I left school at 16, but I went to university as a mature student in my mid-20s, and one of the first things I came across was this essay, Is Heathcliff a Murderer? And it starts with a line something like, when Heathcliff runs off in the storm in 1780, he's an uncouth stable boy, but when he returns he's changed. He's wealthy, he's educated, he's well dressed, and he has a sadistic streak he didn't have when he ran away 3 years before. And those 3 years that he's missing just fascinated me. But the other hole in the narrative is Heathcliff's origins, isn't it? Obviously we met discussing that. That's how we kind of got together. If you know the book, he runs off in 1780. Now, he's found in the streets of Liverpool in 1771 by Mr. Earnshaw, found. Mr. Earnshaw has walked from Yorkshire, it's 70-something miles, and back in 3 days, so that's, there's not much time to stop and experience the Beatles Museum.
Good walking shoes,
Yeah. Get a cocktail at the Albert Docks and like that. So he's gone there for a specific purpose, and he's gone there covertly, because there's a coach at that point from Keighley to Liverpool. He's got horses in his stables. We know this because Jacob refers to them. But he's gone on foot, and he returns with nothing other than this orphan, who he said he found it, and he couldn't find its owner on the streets of Liverpool. Now, in 1780, what's Liverpool famous for? It's famous for being the biggest slave port in, not just in England, in Europe. So I think all the clues are there, really. And we were asked, weren't we? We were asked by various newspapers to comment on this. Because, of course, the way that Emily writes the accounts of Heathcliff, it's very ambiguous, isn't it? And we talk about blackness and darkness in different ways, metaphorically as well as more kind of figurative, more real ways. And it's very clever the way she does that. But one of the things that I did in writing this book, in fact, writing both of these books, because they came about, that was kind of an offshoot of that, I guess, was to go to Liverpool and access the archives. If you know, there's two really, really good archives in Liverpool. There's the Maritime Museum, have got their own archives, that have captains' logs and journals and correspondence. But then there's also Liverpool Central Library that also has a brilliant archive. And I wouldn't say I discovered it, because obviously it's there for anyone to read, really, but there are bill notices of what was going on in Liverpool at the time, in 1780. And they were buying and selling slaves publicly on the streets of Liverpool, even though it was illegal to, slavery has been illegal since the Normans, since the 11th century. And it's always been denied until fairly recently that this was going on. What I also found out is that these slaves were coming to Yorkshire to work on the farms. And Emily may have seen Afro-Caribbean slaves working the farms. And one of the things I do in this book, in Walking the Visible, I go to Dent. There's a museum in Dent, which is a bizarre concept. It's slavery and vampirism. And now it's niche, but it's yes. If you ever go to Dent, and there's not much there really, except for this museum of slavery and vampires. And I walked in there and I said, I'm looking for a slave's graveyard. I'd heard about this, I forget the farmers now, the big manor there, the Suttons, I think it's the Suttons. This is another origin myth, isn't it, in the film, in Adam Lowe's film, in Lone Star. If you know the film, he goes to Dent, and there was a Jamaican plantation owner called Sutton, Richard Sutton, I think it was.
I can't remember now.
And he buys and sells slaves, and he's got a big sugar plantation in Jamaica, and he brings these slaves from Liverpool to Yorkshire, to Dent. And so I walked into this museum knowing nothing about this really at all, and I said, I'm looking for this slave's graveyard. And he said, I'm a descendant of the slaves of Dent. I said, wow. And she showed me a photograph, and you can see, people, there's a school photograph, and you can see that there were people, Afro-Caribbean characteristics in these photographs, And then I realised that this slave poster in Liverpool, Thomas Aston he was called, it was a poster, 5'6", missing, reward money, whatever it was, £5 or £10, a lot of money anyway, had come to work on this farm, the Sutton's farm. But he'd escaped and ran off, and in fact he became a bugler and had a free life. He wasn't enslaved again. So I went looking for this slave's graveyard. I think I found, perhaps, where they were buried. Because they weren't, there was no gravestones. This was, something that. So so all of that is really interesting, I think, isn't it? What is it about Emily, though? We've just been given this deck of cards here, and this is a Bronte's playing cards, and the first thing you see is Emily Brontë on a card. Now there can't be many writers that have their own playing cards, really. What is it about Emily Brontë? There's something about, even within the Brontë world, there's something about Emily. I want to say a cult figure because that's wrong, but there's a kind of aura about her. There's something significantly different about Emily, and people identify with her and obsess about her and connect with her. Do you agree in a different way?
Like you and I, you mean?
well, yeah. She ticks a lot of our boxes, doesn't she? Yeah. She liked walking, cooking, dogs, animals, hated people, loved writing. So yeah, she ticks our boxes. Yeah. But beyond that, what do you think it is?
I think it's part of. I mean, they're a unique literary family, aren't they? And that there's no one like the Brontes, and they're all equally fascinating. But I guess within that sisterhood, Emily's the one that's stereotyped as the outsider, stereotyped as the different, the rebellious one, I guess. Charlotte always falls into the mould, doesn't she, of being the kind of the bossy older sister. And we know that she writes that brilliant thing of, I think it's one of my favourite lines ever, trying to account for why she was sneaking in in Emily's room and found her poetry, and says, one day I accidentally alighted upon my sister's poetry. I don't think that would work, Your Honour, in front of the judge. But I guess Emily is this outsider, isn't she? And we don't have much in Emily's hand by Emily. And actually, one of the things I think that's most interesting is, so we have a lot from Charlotte. We've got a lot of Charlotte's letters. We've got more literary writing from Charlotte. We've got more literary writing from Anne as well. And we've got some of Anne's letters. We don't have much from Emily. We have one novel. We've got a body of beautiful poetry, but it's about 120. Thereabouts.
Which is significant, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but less than her sisters. Well, maybe no, more than Anne, but less than Charlotte, and certainly a lot less than Bramwell. But we've got beautiful little. We've got lots of artwork, which we'll talk about in a minute. We've got beautiful little diary papers. I don't know if any of you know what the diary papers are. They're these small, tiny little pieces that her and Anne wrote periodically every few years. Every few years, and they would record what they were doing in the parsonage. And very often on Emily's, the ones she draws, but she does this thing which fascinates me. She always draws herself with her back towards us, so we only ever see her looking away. She's either looking at a window or at a table doing something. She's also got animals around her. So she is, in many ways, she's mysterious, I guess. She denies us access to her. We don't have lots in her first hand. In the way that we do for the others. So I guess that there's something intriguing about that. There's kind of the fact that she wants to keep us at a distance, and she was intensely private. We know that. We know that out of the siblings, she didn't want her pseudonym, Ellis Bell. She didn't want to be known. We know brilliantly from Charlotte's letters that Charlotte was disclosing it all over the place and saying to people, when you write to me, please don't allude to Emily Ellis as Emily, because we're basically keeping up the ruse. So there's something really fascinating and mysterious about her, and I think, they all suffered from shyness, really intense shyness. And I think it's hard for us to reconcile how somebody can be, I guess, so shy, introverted, but write this majestic novel that captivates the imagination. And people argue over, is it a love novel? Is it a revenge novel? What is it? A tragedy? What is it? And then this beautiful body of poetry as well that picks up on the beauty and the nuances of nature.
But I guess we're still, to an extent,
we're trying to find her in many ways.
We still also, more broadly, people are still kind of informed by Gaskell's portrayal of Emily. Yeah. And of course, Gaskell never met Emily. Emily died a few years before. So she's getting her view of Emily second hand. Yeah. There's quite a few problematic things about that, isn't there? About Gaskell's view of Emily. She doesn't seem to, even though she never met her, she doesn't seem to like her very much.
No, yeah, so it was one of the starting points for me writing my book, Emily Brontë Reappraised, which is really a book about biographies about Emily. And I was really interested in the fact that when you start to unpick the history of Emily Bronte's biography, or Brontë biographies more widely, you see a pattern very quickly, which is people don't seem to like her. In biography, they're very cruel about her and quite punitive. And that doesn't sit well with the fact that people love Emily Brontë and they love her writing, they love her poetry and all the things that she seems to represent. So I was really interested in this cruelty, and a lot of it does stem from Gaskell's The Life of Charlotte Brontë, which is written, obviously, partly informed by Charlotte, but written after the other siblings are dead, and to try and make sense of I guess, who they are. But as you've said, Gaskell never meets Emily, she says that I've never met her, but everything I know about her, I'm not inclined to like her, which is really interesting. And again, the accepted strategy of that book is, Gaskell adores Charlotte, and she takes this strategy of wanting to elevate Charlotte above everybody else. And that means that everyone else does come off as a villain. To what extent they were or not, she still paints them in that way. And with Emily, she does a lot of that. And I think partly my sense is that Gaskell, Gaskell had lost a number of children, and Gaskell clearly admired Charlotte, and I think she was in some ways wanting to forge a relationship with Charlotte that was sisterly, but probably we know from Charlotte's surviving poetry and her letters, Charlotte never got over Emily's death. More than Anne, she never got over it. She says, I could let Anne go to God, but I couldn't let Emily. I want her back, and I want her back now. She just adored her sister, and I think that tension kind of found its way into that Gaskellian narrative that has set every other biographer off in terms of then some of the cruel things they've said about her.
Well, certain things which may or may not be true, but we can't prove them, create a certain impression about Emily, don't they?
Yeah.
So, for example, that she basically punched her dog keeper.
That was more than punching.
Beat up the dog.
Yeah,
A very visceral description of this.
Yeah.
Which portrays in a particular light, doesn't it? Do you buy that? Do you think that Emily did
No,
that?
so that's one of the things. So I looked at in this book. I looked at a lot of the ideas about Emily, and one of them obviously looks a lot again at what she has to say about things and what others have had to say about her. So I looked at that because it's a story, beating up a dog that's got headlines. It resurfaces every few years as another Daily Mail phenomena, as if nobody's written about it before. And you can see why people would, it's clickbait, isn't it? It's sensationalised. And a lot of people do believe it.
And if you know the dog, if you've seen the picture of the dog and you read descriptions of the dog, it's a mastiff cross. It's a large, powerful dog, isn't it?
It's a huge dog, yeah. And thankfully to my publisher, they put some reproductions of some of Emily's art, including this picture of her dog Keeper. In the book. So I went back looking through a lot of this material, and I spent time with the original portrait of Keeper, with his collar, and with lots of her other artwork. And if you look at the surviving body of Emily's artwork, 80% of it is animals. It's all a love of animals.
And also very proficient.
Well, we'll talk about this now, but I was going to say with this particular Keeper one, you can see, and it doesn't ever come out in reproductions, but you can see the care and the love that she's taken drawing Keeper. He appears in many, many images. But the problem with that story is twofold. One, it's written, if you look back at how Gaskell writes about it, it's written as if she's an eyewitness to it, which of course she wasn't, if it even happened, because it happened many years earlier, allegedly. And we know other servants disputed just as well. I think it was Martha who said, I'd have heard about this if it happened. But it's also filled with melodrama. It's filled with over-the-top violence.
Well, I was going to say there's something actually even more problematic about it, which is she is relating this via Charlotte and a maid. Is it Martha or Tabitha? I can't remember which one. Tabby, yeah. And the way it's described, they're not even in the room when it happens.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. So it's almost as if she's a kind of fly on the wall describing everything. And it is filled with Victorian melodrama. And the thing about it is, apart from the fact that there isn't any other evidence for it. In the Gaskell book, it's an unattributed source, and I guess more recent books might have you say, well, it was Charlotte that told Gaskell that, but there isn't any other evidence for it. But it sits counter to everything else we know about Emily and animals. It just does, and so it's hard to square away this idea of a disciplinarian when, if you look at all of the other stuff, it's contrary to that. And I guess this brings us on to this piece of artwork. So this is Emily's painting of a Merlin, her Merlin. We don't know how she came to acquire a Merlin, but we know that she spent some time and painted this. And again, even this, This is a picture from October 1841. We don't know why she has a Merlin, do we? But it's a beautiful piece in its original. Do you want to tell us about your interest in this Merlin and what you've been doing with it? Because it's really interesting.
Well, I became fascinated not just by this painting, but about the acquisition of the Merlin itself. Most of Emily's biographers don't even mention the Merlin. So Robinson doesn't, Chitham doesn't, Barker doesn't, Jerrin doesn't. I mean, in fact, none of them. In fact, you're one of the few Emily biographers who actually mentions the Merlin. You discuss it in great detail. I don't know why, because I think it's her best painting. I really do. I think it's the not just her best painting, but probably the best painting of the Brontë family. I just think it's a beautiful composition. Some scholars and some Brontë writers have said it's a copy from Buick. If you know about the Brontës, they were, steeped in this book here, which came out originally in 2 volumes. This is Buick's British Birds, which came out first as Land Birds and then Water Birds, and then it was brought together as a one volume. All of the Brontë family did make copies of, I should say this is an illustrated, so Buick was a woodcut artist. He basically created these wonderful images of birds and then printed them in the book. If you look at his Merlin, you'll see it's quite different. It's positioned in a very different way. It doesn't resemble really, the background's very different.
It's got a little vague bit.
Well, if you look at what the Brontës were doing when they were copying Buick, they were exact copies. They were absolutely exact copies. And I think there's something like about a dozen copies from about 1824 to about 1836, so about a 12-year period. They were becoming artists via copying these things. This is very different. This is some years after. This is 1841.
Yeah, so she was. This is after her time here in Halifax.
Yeah.
She's gone back home. This is before she goes to Brussels, though. So this is when she's at home.
This is just before she goes to Brussels. Yeah, a few months in fact. So she paints this, but we know she acquires a Merlin that she calls Nero on the moors. We don't know how she acquired this. We don't even know when. Alexander and Sellers, Christine Alexander, Jane Sellers, wrote a book called The Art of the Brontës, and they speculate and say that this poem, where is it? The Cage. Again, it's an untitled poem, but there's a poem that Emily wrote called. It isn't called anything, but it's now been called A Caged Bird. So she writes this poem. When is it? It's sort of January, February, isn't it? In 1841. Let's just find it.
That's on
Actually.
my way, Heather. You talk and I'll find it.
No, I'll find it. So we love each other, really. We do get on. So yeah, I'll read this out actually, because this was the poem she wrote in February 1841, and Alexander and Sellers, and not just Alexander Sellers, Jerry, other people as well, have said that this poem is inspired by her acquisition of this Merlin. So I'll read this poem out. And like myself, lone, wholly lone, it sees the day's long sunshine glow. And like myself, it makes its moan in unexhausted woe. Give we the hills our equal prayer, earth's breezy hills and heaven's blue sea. We ask for nothing further here, but our own heart and liberty. Ah, could my hand unlock its chain, how gladly would I watch it soar, and never regret and never complain, to see its shining eyes no more. But let me think that if today it pines in cold captivity, tomorrow both shall soar away, eternally, entirely, free. Now, what you probably notice about that poem is she's identifying herself with this bird, isn't she? She's saying, like me, like me, like me. This is me. And it's almost like if this is the same bird, this is a self-portrait almost. This is no coward soul is mine. This is the old Stoic. This is Emily somehow. And I think it's also a poem that's in the Romantic tradition. It makes me think of Caspar David Friedrich's Wander Above the Sea of Fog. If you think about how that subject is positioned in that painting on a precipice overlooking this kind of abyss, that's how the Merlin bird is positioned here.
But do you want to say what you're again? So a lot of people have talked about this bird as a he and him being hero, Nero.
So Gerin, I think, gets it wrong, doesn't she? She annotates it as hero, but it's actually Nero. So she called the bird Nero, which is a male moniker, obviously. This, I'm 99% sure, is a painting of a female Merlin. If you know anything about Merlins, you know that the male has a blue back, the female has a brown back. You'll know that the male has one barred stripe on the end of its tail. The female has these three stripes. The male has a more mustachioed face than the female. So it's quite different, actually. The Merlin is very different.
And you've been speaking to like British ornithology and all of those things about this.
Well,
following this.
I got so far with this, and then I thought, hang on a minute, it could be a juvenile, because the male Merlin, a juvenile male Merlin, looks like a female Merlin until he gets its adult plumage, which happens, sort of 12 months afterwards. So I started to really doubt my, reading of this, and so I contact, if you know about the BTO, British Trust for Ornithology, they're the kind of scientists that do all the stats around ornithology. And I contacted their Merlin expert to ask his opinion. And I sent him this image, and he said, again, he couldn't be absolutely sure because it's a painting, it's not a photograph, but he was, again, 99% sure that this was a female adult bird.
So what's the concluding point from this then is that...
So we go back to Buick. Now, here's what's interesting. Now, he also noticed in that poem, it's it, isn't it? There's no gender, there's no he or she in that poem, it's it. Which isn't that surprising, birds are often described in that way. Although we found an ornithology book in a new house we've just bought, which is an old book, and almost all the descriptions of raptors are it, except for the Merlin, which is he, which is interesting. Yeah. But if you look at, this is Buick now, and his description of the Merlin is, he says, he gets lots and lots of things wrong. He says that the Merlin does not exceed the size of a blackbird, but that's only true of the male, not the female, because like with most raptors, the male is much smaller than the female. That's generally how raptors are. He makes no distinction between the male and the female, by the way, at all. He says that the Merlin has wings of deepish brown, tinged with ash, but it's only the female that has a brown back, the male has a blue back. So he's obviously never seen a specimen, a male specimen of the bird. He says that it has dusky pale bars on its tail, but again, that's only true of the female, not the male. He says...
the point is, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that you think if she got her knowledge from Buick, she's been misinformed.
So I'm getting to that. So basically, the most likely source for her knowledge about the Merlin is this book that's sat in their library, that's sat in the Brontë parsonage. So it isn't, you don't need to be a detective really to think, well, hang on a sec, well, maybe this is why she's possibly misidentified the gender of the bird.
I like how you say, I don't need to be a detective, but you've actually gone and searched all this out and sleuthed the Merlin.
Well, what I was going to say, I'm just aware of time, that last year, the year before, is it now, Hammersfeld was collected? Was it last year or year before?
A couple of years ago.
So if you've been following that story, a private collection came into the hands, it was a long process, but a couple of years ago, the parsonage acquired a private collection of not just Brontë stuff, but lots of Brontë stuff, including Patrick Bronte's copy of Buick's British Birds, which is annotated. He has annotated his book. Most of it is just, this tastes nice, or avoid this one. It's got sort of culinary tips on how to eat the bird. But the page on the Merlin is very interesting, because he talks about, it must have been while Emily was away, he just dates it PB 1841. Now, we know that when Emily comes back from Brussels, the Merlin has disappeared. That's late, it's 1842, but anyway, that's another mystery. But he talks about going into the cage where the Merlin is being kept and using tweezers, plucking feathers from the... Why he was doing this, I don't know, but Patrick Brontë was plucking feathers from this bird. And he had thick leather gloves on, proper, what's the word for them? Gauntlets, So he's gone in there, and this merlin, the merlin is the smallest raptor. It's about the size of a thrush or a blackbird. It's quite a small bird. And it's used its talons to pierce through these very thick leather gloves, pierce right through his skin. He's bleeding profusely. He notes this in his annotated copy. So yeah, and I just became fascinated by the bird. And
you wrote a poem about it. Should we end on your poem?
Well, should we do that?
Your Emily poem?
Because I thought what we could also do is just also talk about the bogburst, because this is the poem ends with well, we'll just talk very quickly about it, because it's 200 years of the bogburst, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So quickly, do you want to tell us a story about the bogburst?
There was a big bogburst in 1824, and when the children were Anne, Bramwell and Emily, all under 6, were taken for a walk by their servants. Anne was walking 4 miles when she was like a couple of years old. I mean, it's huge. Out onto the moors, and they experienced this huge bog burst, which was an eruption of the soil, miles up into the air, boulders, all kinds of damage was done to local surroundings, and it comes flooding down the valley, and thanks to the quick thinking of the servants, pushed the children into the doorway of Pondon Hall. And if you look at Emily's poem High Waving Heather, you can see echoes of some of that writing about the bog burst. So it kind of stayed with her, that kind of fascination about the environment and environmental catastrophe.
I mean, what was interesting is you were talking, then you talked about the explosion on Stanbury Moor, on Stanbury Bog, basically, above Top Withens. So if you walk beyond Top Withens, you come to Stanbury Bog, and that's where the explosion happened, just above Pondon Hall. And when you described it, you talked about heath and rock, heath and cliff being thrown up, yeah? And one way you can see the character of Heathcliff is a personification of that bog burst, this violent, monstrous kind of thing that comes out of the moors.
Let's bring it back to the Merlin. Read your Merlin poem to end.
Okay, so...
Sorry.
She's worse than this at home. She's worse than this at home. You've seen her best behaviour today. So it's 200 years, so let's end with this. So the poem basically is about Emily's bird. It's in 2 parts, so it's Emily first of all, then there's like a bit in the middle, and then it's Patrick. So she goes away, then it's Patrick. And it ends with the bog burst, yeah. I should say this is from this beautiful book here called No Net Ensnares Me. Prose poems, all based about the Brontes, which is for sale here, in fact. Yeah. Emily's Merlin. You found the bird on the heath, half starved and close to death. Her feathers wet, a talon clutched to her breast. You took her in the hand's cup and warmed her with your breath. You wrapped her in a shawl and held her to your chest. Near the brasses of the hearth, you perched her by its fire, fed her milk and bread as she rapt you with her eyes. Eyes as old as storm, unflinching ire. How more alive than Buick's, this bird of sable wing, who made a home among the ling, tinged with ash, streaked with black, a bird of moor and gauze, who feasts on lark and pipit. You caged her. She caged her. I took note of each feather, saw God's craft in each crease. Then she molted, and I plucked her tail with steel tweezers. Her talons pierced through thick hair gloves, drawing blood, pouring red. I watched her soar over scripted slabs, unsettling the graveyard's jackdaws, how they screeched as she passed, heading out towards Black Leach, while grouse hid by gauze and curlews sang songs of woe, further past Withen's slack, to the cluster of stones by the wage of Crow Hill, where once a heaven had upturned itself, and the earth opened its mouth and spat out hell.